Okay, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Today we're going to be talking about Parashat Tavo. I noticed when I started preparing that I actually presented this a couple of years ago. So what I'm going to do today, as we all know, there are Shivim Panim LeTorah, 70 different aspects that we can look at. So I'm going to try to look at some of the aspects that I didn't go into, or I didn't go into in any detail 2 years ago. But probably most of us won't remember anyway what we talked about 2 years ago. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Okay. Deuteronomy, the book of Dvarim. Deuteronomy in Greek means the second law. So the whole book is about Moses's last speech or speeches to the people of Israel. It happens outside the land of Israel, just before the time that Moses is leaving this life, and the people will have to go on without him and cross into the land. So one of the questions that we'll ask today is, why does Moses make this last speech? And we'll also talk about if he reacts a second Mount Sinai, if this is like a different take on the revelation of Sinai. Then we'll go on to a unique prayer that is mentioned for the first time in this parasha. It's called Vidui Habikurim, what the farmers are supposed to say when they bring the first fruit and where they have to bring it to. And we'll ask why this passage became one of the major texts for a different festival that's not Shavuot. I want to talk about a nation of storytellers and the power of memory, based on Rabbi Jonathan Sachs and some of the things he said. We're going to touch very quickly on the blessings and curses on Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal. And I'm going to ask the question, why are the curses so much more detailed than the blessings? And why are we getting echoes of the plagues of Egypt? Then I hope we'll have time to deal with the subject of Yirah. Yirah in Hebrew means fear or awe. And we'll ask if this is a positive or negative. I'm going to be basing that on writings of Rav Shai Held from Machon Hadar. And then I'm going back to Rabbi Sachs to talk about joy and happiness, simcha and osher, and see if there's a difference. So we got a lot to get through. I hope we'll get through it all. I'd like somebody to volunteer to read Robert Alter's commentary on Deuteronomy. Any volunteers?
Okay, I can.
Good.
If one tries to imagine the actual audience for which Deuteronomy was first framed, it will begin to be evident that its impressive deployment of rhetoric serves another purpose. Rhetoric is an art of persuasion, and the rhetoric of Deuteronomy is meant to persuade audiences in the late First Commonwealth and exilic period of the palpable and authoritative reality of an event that never occurred, or at any rate, surely did not occur as it is represented in this text. The National Assembly in Transjordan, that was a second covenant after the covenant at Sinai, in which Moses reviewed the whole code of law, rapidly rehearsed the story of the wilderness wanderings, and exhorted the people to be loyal to God with repeated predictions of the dire consequences if they should fail in their loyalty. There are, in fact, two equivalences that the language of Moses's address is devised to establish an equivalence between this solemn convocation and the defining experience at Sinai, which is repeatedly referred to as Yom HaGahal, the day of Kahal, the day of assembly, in order to line it up with this new assembly in the Transjordan, and an equivalence between the experience of this audience physically present to receive Moses's last words and that of the 7th century BCE audience and its prospective heirs listening to the book of Deuteronomy and assenting to its authority. The resources of rhetoric are marshaled to create, through a written text, the memory of a foundational national event, so that the latter-day Israelites listening to this book of teaching, Sefer HaTorah Hazeh, will feel that they themselves are reenacting the event. Moses's valedictory transmission of God's commands to Israel is a second Sinai, and the written text that records his final discourses is in turn understood to be the permanent vehicle through which an approximation of the Sinai experience can be reenacted.
Okay, thanks, Carol. Robert Alter, in his wonderful translation, which I haven't used in this presentation, but I've used his commentary here, I think is very perceptive, and it talks about the historic nature of this event that happens in our parasha. In fact, it happens throughout the whole of the book of Dvarim, which is the reenactment of the giving of the Torah. Micha Goodman, who is an amazing writer and philosopher and teacher, calls and wrote about this book as the last speech of Moses. And one of the things that he says in his book is that there's another way of looking at the 5 books of Moses. The first 4 books are God-given, and the 5th book is Moses given. So even though Moses was the messenger for the first 4 books, in the 5th book, he reinterprets, he refines some of the ideas that are in the previous texts. And Micha Goodman says something that I found very interesting. He said, we can look at the book of Deuteronomy as the first book of Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah that Moses gives, because he basically repeats a lot of the things that we read in the first 4 books, but on some of them he gives a little twist and a little different type of emphasis. Okay. Let's just read from the beginning of the parasha. Would somebody like to read?
Okay, I will. I declare, from
the beginning in English.
From the beginning. And it will be when you come into the land which the Lord your God gives you for an inheritance, and you possess it and settle in it, that you shall take of the first of all the fruit of the ground, which you will bring from your land, which the Lord your God is giving you, and you shall put them into a basket and go to the place which the Lord your God will choose to have his name dwell there. And you shall come to the Kohen who will be serving in those days and say to him, I declare this day to the Lord your God that I have come to the land which the Lord swore to our forefathers to give us. And the Kohen will take the basket from your hand, laying it before the altar of the Lord your God.
Does anybody want to comment on this piece?
In the Haggadah.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get to that in
Main
a
part of
minute.
the Haggadah, basically.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah. Well, I think it's trying to show that even nature is related to God's beneficence to man.
Okay. One of the things about this parasha that attracted me is the name, Ki Tavo El Haaretz, because I think all of us participating today have been through that experience at some stage of our lives, and maybe for different reasons we decided to come. But for me, it was always an important, positive command, if you like, a secular command to come to the land of Israel for my teenage years. And there was a song that I heard from those days, which I'm going to try to play for you now. It's called Ki Tavo El Haaretz, sung by Nechama Hindel, the late Nechama Hindel, who was one of the foremost Israeli folk singers of the late 50s and 60s. The verses are taken from the Tanakh, not specifically from our parasha, except for maybe the title. It's based on a Yemenite tune. I hope I can play it. Okay. Sorry about the adverts. I'll finish this simple. Okay. Okay. I hope you enjoyed the musical interlude. Let me get back to the. Can you see the presentation or not yet?
No, not yet.
I want to continue with reading from the Parashat. Would somebody like to volunteer?
Excuse me, Ilan, can you make it larger?
I can.
The- Enlarge the screen. Or...
I'll read.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to make it larger.
Mm-hmm.
Is that better?
Yes, that's better. Thanks. And you shall call out and say before the Lord your God, an Aramean sought to destroy my forefather, and he went down to Egypt and sojourned there with a small number of people, and there he became a great, mighty, and numerous nation. And the Egyptians treated us cruelly and afflicted us, and they imposed hard labor upon us. So we cried out to the Lord, God of our fathers, and the Lord heard our voice and saw our affliction, our toil, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us out from Egypt with a strong hand and with an outstretched arm, with great awe and with signs and wonders. And he brought us to this place, and he gave us this land, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now, behold, I have brought the first of the fruit of the ground, which you, O Lord, has given to me. Then you shall lay it before the Lord your God, and prostrate yourself before the Lord your God. Then you shall rejoice with all the good that the Lord your God has granted you in your household, you, the Levite, and the stranger who is among you.
And there's one more quote. Wait a second. Okay.
You have to move it up.
Yeah.
Every peasant in each generation of Israel, when he brings the first fruits, thanks God for the land into which God has brought him. Boober.
Okay.
Also a little bit like the Haggadah, that we have to see ourselves as, slaves in Egypt.
Yes, yeah, Barbara, you're very right. And Ben mentioned it before. This is one of the formative texts used in the Haggadah for Pesach. And in a minute, we'll discuss the meaning of this text. Here I highlighted a couple of phrases that come up a number of times in the parasha. Milk and honey, the land flowing with milk and honey, which we recognize and has been a source for many songs and poems and other writings about Israel. And then in verse 11, v'samachta, and rejoicing, which we will touch towards the end of this session. Okay, I want to now move on to one of the things that Rabbi Jonathan Sachs wrote about this parasha. So would somebody like to read?
I can read if you like.
Sure.
Okay. What makes a leader is the ability to tell a particular kind of story, one that explains ourselves to ourselves and gives power and resonance to a collective vision. So Churchill told the story of Britain's indomitable courage in the fight for freedom. Gandhi spoke about the dignity of India and non-violent protest. Margaret Thatcher talked about the importance of the individual against an ever-encroaching state. Martin Luther King told of how a great nation is colorblind. Stories give the group a shared identity and a sense of purpose. The great questions, who are we, why are we here, and what is our task, are best answered by telling a story. This is fundamental to understanding why Torah is the kind of book it is, not a theological treatise or a metaphysical system, but a series of interlinked stories extended over time, from Abram and Sarah's journey from Mesopotamia to Moses and the Israelites wandering in the desert.
You continue, Ben?
A large part of what Moses is doing in the book of Devarim is retelling the story, or retelling that story to the next generation, reminding them of what God has done for their parents and some of the mistakes their parents had made. Moses, as well as being the great liberator, is a supreme storyteller. Yet what he does in Parashat Tavo extends way beyond this. He tells the people that when they enter, conquer, and settle the land, they must bring the first ripened fruits to the central sanctuary, the temple, as a way of giving thanks to God. Merely bringing fruits, though, was not enough. Each person had to make a declaration. That declaration became one of the best-known passages in the Torah, because though it was originally said on Shavuot, the festival of first fruits, its post-biblical times, it became the central element of the Haggadah on Seder night. Here, for the first time, the retelling of the nation's history became an obligation for every citizen of the nation. In this act known as Vidui Bikurim,
Is
the
it dripping?
Hello? Vidui Bikurim, the confession made over the first fruits, Jews were commanded, as it were, to become a nation of storytellers. By making the Israelites a nation of storytellers, Moses helped turn them into a people bound by collective responsibility to one another, to the past and the future, and to God. By framing a narrative that successive generations would make their own and teach to their children, Moses turned Jews into a nation of leaders and storytellers, I think. He should have added.
Okay, anybody want to comment on that? I want to just go back to Arami Oved Avi. So in these few lines, the whole of the history of the Jewish people up to that time was compressed into a few sentences. It's talked about the wanderings, the going down to Egypt, the coming out of Egypt, and coming to the land. Very, very concise.
Yeah, I have a comment. Just thinking off the top of my head that the story is far more powerful than whether it is absolute truth or not. as we have been struggling in the present generation with people who have said there's no evidence that we were a people, and there's no evidence that, you know, that there's no physical evidence, and so on and so forth. But that doesn't really matter, because the story is what has kept us as a nation going from generation to generation,
Yes,
I
and over-
think.
Yeah, and over thousands of years. Thank you.
It's a big, but yeah, anyway.
Um, anybody else?
Yeah, Ilan,
Sure.
can you hear me? I've
Yeah.
got my phone and my computer on. I'm not sure how this is working.
Yeah, you're.
Yeah, because the sound on the phone isn't working. There's a interesting sort of problem with the story, or maybe it actually explains a lot of where we are today. There's no Ma'amad Har Sinai. There's no revelation in the story. I mean, the biggest event of the wilderness generation just isn't there. And I mean, I can't remember now who. I definitely remember reading years ago something by one of the intellectual leaders of the kibbutz movement saying, okay, this shows that revelation is not necessarily connected to entering the land, and that's a different narrative. I didn't think his particular essay was very convincing, but I haven't, other than, you know, really source critical kinds of scholars who do say that there were two different stories and the Torah pastes them together, there's not a real good answer that I've seen for why that's skipped over.
But Shoshana, isn't it skipped over in the tefillot as well? I mean, when we
Yes,
pray,
there's a
we
lot of
pray
places
about coming out of Egypt rather than going to Sinai.
that
Sinai.
this is true. That doesn't make it easy to explain.
No.
One of the things that I read, I can't remember whether it was Yitz Greenberg or somebody else was saying, why don't we have a festival for the coming into the land of Israel? We have a festival, we do have a festival for Matan Torah, and we do have a festival for leaving Egypt, and for Sukkot wandering in the wilderness, but where is our festival for coming into the land? So maybe there's just too many
Well,
events.
except in the Torah, you don't have a festival for the giving of the Torah. That's added on later. In a sense, Shavuot, when you're bringing first fruits to the temple on the Torah level, is the festival of being in the land. Sarah Shuv has written about Sukkot as the festival of being in the land, not necessarily entering, but settling.
Okay, but the symbolism of Sukkot is very much a symbolism of the time in the wilderness.
Yes and no, but I'm not going to steal your lesson by
Okay.
talking about that.
All right, okay, that's a little bit of a side pathway. Would somebody like to continue reading from a bit later in the Parashat? Any takers?
And and Moses and the elders of Israel commanded the people, saying, observe all of the commandments that I command you this day. And it will be on the day that you cross the Jordan to the land the Lord your God is giving you, that you shall set up for yourself huge stones and plaster them with lime. When you cross, you shall write upon them all the words of this Torah, in order that you may come to the land which the Lord your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord God of your fathers has spoken to you. And it will be when you come across the Jordan that you shall set up these stones, regarding which I command you this day on Mount Ebal, and you shall plaster them with lime. And there you shall build an altar to the Lord your God, an altar of stones, and you shall not wield any iron upon them. You shall build the altar of the Lord your God out of whole stones, and on it you shall offer up burnt offerings to the Lord your God. And you shall slaughter peace offerings, and you shall eat there, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God. You shall write upon the stones all the words of this Torah very clearly.
Okay. Any comments on that piece?
I actually have something. Good morning, everybody. I actually have something that might give Shoshana something. Up until now, we've been about the Torah, about the revelation and everything. Now this is all about the land. This is all about coming into the land. So now we're coming into the land, and there's a combination here of what we need to do. And I think that might be part of the process. Additionally, this is something that is, we don't want to have a festival if we've come in and we've had to move people out and kill people and take people into captivity. I think we're all, it's trying to stay very positive here in its approach.
Mhm. Okay. I want to carry on. Ilana, can you carry on just reading the next few lines of the Parashat?
And Moses commanded the people on that day, saying, when you cross the Jordan, the following shall stand upon Mount Gerizim to bless the people: Simon, Levi, Shimon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Yosef, and Benjamin. And the following shall stand upon Mount Ebal for the curse: Reuben, Gad, Asher, Zebulun, Dan, and Naphtali. And you shall write upon the stones all the words of this Torah very clearly in 70 languages. Oh,
Okay, that was Rashi's
Be'er
interpretation.
b'shiv'im lashon. Okay. Wow. Okay. Huh.
Okay, so obviously this story that Moses is telling of what they have to do, you have to ask yourself, is it feasible on the day that they cross into the land, presumably being faced by hostile local inhabitants? They will build an altar. In fact, on Mount Ebal, the mountain of the curses. So we can ask ourselves why. And that they will whitewash the stones and write the words of all the Torah. Even if they wrote all the words of all the Torah once, that's a lot. But if they, as Rashi says, in 70 languages, so that all the people of the world can understand it, then it's even greater. And then get from the Jordan River to near Shechem and go up on 2 mountains. This is a lot to expect the people to do, and so this may be a figurative way of saying, this is what you need to do in the period when you enter the land. And one of the first things is the blessings on the curses. But I don't believe that it can all be achieved on one day. I think it's physically impossible.
Ilan, it's interesting that the tribes that were on Mount Gerizim were basically the ones that survived. Judah, Benjamin, probably Levi and Shimon also. Most the other ones disappeared, basically.
And also a couple of years ago, we talked about the different tribes that were given this job. And, would you have liked to have been in a tribe that was sent to Har Eval to curse the people? And these, one of the commentators I used last time said, it's like the A team and the B team of the tribes.
Ilan, in your research, did you discover why they were divided this way? Does anybody know?
Isn't it according to the tribe, the Leah's children are on the cursed side and or not? Maybe I'm no,
Yes,
sorry. Yeah, and the
um,
and the
Rachel,
concubines' children, the concubines' children are on the other side.
yeah,
Joseph and Benjamin.
yeah,
Yes, Benjamin, Leah and Rachel, Benjamin and yeah.
yeah. That's right.
Leah and
That's right.
Rachel's children are on one side and the others are on the other.
That's
Thank
There
you.
was always that
certainly
division.
possible.
Excuse me, Ilan, I can't hear you that well.
Let's see.
I can hear everybody else.
Does that make a difference?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll carry on reading a little bit about some of the curses. Would somebody like to take this task on themselves?
Can you make it larger, please?
Yeah.
Whoops. Now I can. Have to put it a little bit smaller. Not too small. You want me to continue?
Yes, please.
It will be if you do not obey the Lord your God to observe, to fulfill all his commandments and statutes, which I am commanding you this day, that all these curses will come upon you and overtake you. You shall be cursed in the city, and you shall be cursed in the field. Cursed will be your basket, your food basket, and your kneading bowl. Cursed will be the fruit of your womb, the fruit of your soil, the fruit of your livestock, those born from your cattle and the flock of your sheep. You shall be cursed when you come, and you shall be cursed when you depart. The Lord will send the curse of shortages, confusion, and turmoil upon you in every one of your endeavors which you undertake until it destroys you, until you quickly vanish because of your evil deeds in forsaking me. The Lord will make pestilence cleave to you until it has exterminated you from upon the land to which you are coming to possess it. The Lord will strike you with the boils of Egypt, with hemorrhoids, with oozing sores, and with dry lesions from which you will be unable to be cured. The Lord will strike you with insanity, with blindness, and with bewilderment. You will grope at midday as the blind man gropes in the dark, and you will be unsuccessful in your ways. You will be only oppressed and robbed all the days, and no one will save you.
Okay.
Those are powerful curses. Yes.
The powerful curses, the first few echo in a negative way the blessings that were said, which I didn't copy, which part of the Parashat. And these are the curses, but the curses are much more descriptive. They're much more detailed. And I just want to carry on with the curses for another minute or so. Can you read that, Ilana?
Okay. Then the Lord will bring upon you and your offspring uniquely horrible plagues, terrible and unyielding plagues. Oh, we're getting worse. And he will bring upon you all the diseases of Egypt, which you dreaded, and they will cling to you. Also, the Lord will bring upon you every disease and plague which is not written in this Torah scroll to destroy you. And the Lord will bring you back to Egypt in ships, though the way upon which I said to you, you will never see it again. And there you will seek to be sold to your enemies for slaves and handmaids, but there will be no buyer. These are the words of the covenant which the Lord commanded Moses to make with the children of Israel in the land of Moab, besides the covenant which he made with them in Horeb.
We have a couple of things here that I want to pay attention to. Here, the curses include many of the plagues which were plagues of Egypt, and he talks about bringing you back to Egypt in ships. I thought that was interesting. Why in ships? Possibly because it won't take you 40 years to wander through the desert. You'll get on a boat and you'll be back in Egypt before you know it. And the last line here is the parallel between Sinai and this particular covenant.
Can you speak louder, more loudly?
Yes.
It's really hard to hear you.
Okay. I will try to speak louder. I hope that's a bit better. Okay. Let's move on.
Didn't hear what you said about the ships. What was the last thing you said about the...
I said this way, the children of Israel will be brought back to Egypt in a much quicker way than they left. They'll be there in no time at all. Okay. I want us to look at a this is an article by Rabbi Shai Held, one of the rabbis from Mason Hadar. Barbara, would you like to read?
Okay, I'll read. Rabbi Shai Held from Makon Hadar. Reading the curses in Deuteronomy can be a distressing experience. After a relatively brief evocation of the good fortune that awaits Israel, should it obey God's laws, Deuteronomy 28, Parashat Tavo goes to great lengths to describe the disasters that will befall the people should they disobey. The list is harrowing in the extreme. Israel is threatened with drought, diseases, crop failure, economic collapse, and dependency, defeat in war, conquest, oppression, famine, cannibalism, and exile. Yet the text is so graphically brutal that one cannot help but wonder, can it really be desirable for the Jewish people to worship God out of abject fear? On one level, it would seem the answer is yes. After all, Jewish theology places great emphasis on our obligation to fear God, or does it? The word yirah, so central to biblical theology and spirituality, is conventionally translated as fear, but in fact, it has a wide range of meanings. Something described as norah, for example, can be either terror instilling or awe-inspiring. Yeah, I heard that usually awe. They talk about
Okay. In the next page, I won't read it because it's getting a little bit late. Shai Held talks about three rabbis who have different approaches. Yosef Albo from the 14th century, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto from the beginning of the 18th century, and in between them, in fact, earlier, Rambam. And he talks about the difference between being pushed by fear or being awed into belief and observation of the commandments. And the feeling is that Rambam and Luzzatto, that fear is a lower reason to keep the commandments, and that people who study or people who have wisdom of age will prefer the awe-inspiring moments. Okay, let's just read his conclusion. Want to continue, Barbara? Barbara, can you unmute yourself?
If fear and awe are so different, why does the same Hebrew word yirah convey both? If one of the core goals of the religious life is to teach us that our interests and concerns ought not to be the exclusive center of our lives, then fear of punishment is something that must ultimately be minimized, or perhaps, according to some, jettisoned altogether. As an alternative, Jewish tradition offers us awe, wherein we acknowledge someone far greater than ourselves, and thus allow God and not our own egos to become the very center of our world.
Anybody want to comment?
Yeah, I think it shows a big difference between Judaism and Christianity. I mean, Christianity, the fear of going to hell if you do bad things is very, very prominent. Whilst in Judaism, the whole question of heaven and hell is kind of ignored, basically.
Yeah, I don't think it's ignored in
Not
Judaism.
ignored, but it's certainly minimized.
It's not the central thing. You definitely have a good point there. Okay, I want to do to move on to the last issue that I want to talk about today is about joy. Would anybody like to read? This is from Rabbi Jonathan Sachs.
I'll be happy to read. Happiness versus joy. Happiness, said Aristotle, is the ultimate goal at which all humans aim. But in Judaism, it is not necessarily so. Happiness is a high value. Ashrei, the closest Hebrew word to happiness, is the first word of the book of Psalms. We say the prayer known as Ashrei 3 times a day. We can surely endorse the phrase in the American Declaration of Independence that among the inalienable rights of humankind are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But Ashrei is not the central value of the Hebrew Bible. Occurring almost 10 times as frequently is the word simcha, joy. It is one of the fundamental themes of Deuteronomy as a book. The root SMCH appears only once in each of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers, but no less than 12 times in Deuteronomy. It lies at the heart of the Mosaic vision of life in the land of Israel. That is where we serve God with joy. Joy in Tavo. Joy plays a role in 2 contexts in this week's Parashat. One has to do with the bringing of the first fruits to the temple in Jerusalem. After describing the ceremony that took place, the Torah concludes, then you will rejoice in all the good things that the Lord your God has given you and your family, along with the Levites and the stranger in your midst. The other context is quite different and astonishing. It occurs in the context of the curses, those in Deuteronomy and in bleak despair. The curses in Deuteronomy are provoked simply because you did not serve the Lord your God with joy and gladness of heart out of the abundance of all things. I never thought of it that way, Ilan. Thank you.
Can you continue?
What does the Torah mean when it attributes national disaster to a lack of joy? Why does joy seem to matter in Judaism more than happiness? Happiness is a state of mind of an individual. Simcha in the Torah is never about individuals. It is always about something we share. A newly married man does not serve in the army for a year, says the Torah, so that he can stay at home and bring joy to the wife he is married. last week's Parsha, Kititse. You shall bring all your offerings to the central sanctuary, says Moses, so that there is a presence of the Lord your God. There in the presence of the Lord your God, and your families shall eat and rejoice in all you have put your hand to, because the Lord your God has blessed you. Moses' insistence that the capacity for joy is what gives the Jewish people the strength to endure. Without it, we become vulnerable to the multiple disasters set out in the curses in our Parashat. Celebrating together binds us as a people. That and the gratitude and humility that come from seeing our achievements not as self-made, but as the blessings of God. The pursuit of happiness can lead ultimately to self-regard and indifference to the sufferings of others. It can lead to risk-averse behavior and a failure to dare greatly, not so joy. Joy connects us to others and to God. Joy is the ability to celebrate life as such, knowing that whatever tomorrow may bring, we are here today under God's heaven in the universe He made, to which He has invited us as His guests. And J.D. Salinger on the difference between happiness and joy. J.D. Salinger, the author of Catcher in the Rye, once wrote, "Fact is always obvious much too late, but the most singular difference between happiness and joy is when happiness is solid and joy is a liquid."
Okay, I thought that was a nice quote to bring things to a sort of conclusion. Are there any comments about
Ilan, I was thinking while I was reading, the 3 years that we bring, after 3 years we bring the first fruits. These are the first times that they've actually needed to provide for themselves their own food. They're not collecting manna anymore, and they have to work at it. But it's a reminder that there's a greater force above you that enables you to do this, and you should be joyful that, look, when you think about something that you produce, how happy you are about it, but you're reminded to be thankful that it's a joint venture.
Certainly, it's not the first time that the children of Israel were involved in agriculture. In Egypt they were, but they were not involved as free people. This is the first time, you're right, that they're involved as sort of an independent people having to provide for it. So, yeah, I think it's a very good comment. Would anybody else like to add anything? Okay. In which case, a couple of things. I would like to thank everybody for being here, and remind you that next week, same time, same place. I'm not quite sure who's leading next week's discussion. I'm sure Steve will update us all. And for those of us that are able, there is a musical Tavo Shabbat this evening in Abba Haba, starting at 5:30, and everybody is very welcome. Okay, so with that, we will end for today.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ilan.
Thank you, Ilan.
Okay.
Carol, you're a star.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom.